3 years after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, the haunting images of August 2021 still resonate. Desperate Afghans clinging to planes, the Afghan government's collapse, and the Taliban's swift return. The end of America's longest war was meant to be orderly, but instead became a symbol of chaos and strategic failure. For veterans and families who sacrificed, the exit felt like a betrayal. The mission to build a stable Afghanistan unraveled in days, forcing us to confront the entire arc of the conflict and its consequences. The stark contrast between official assurances and the reality on the ground left deep wounds. The fall of Kabul shocked the world, undermining the narrative of a successful withdrawal. This anniversary compels us to examine the fallout, the human cost, and the lessons still being debated. The echoes of Kabul continue to shape America's foreign policy and national identity. The final days at Hamid Karzai International Airport were marked by unimaginable tragedy. Amid the chaos of the evacuation, a suicide bombing ripped through the crowds, killing 13 U.S. service members in an instant. The attack sent shockwaves through the airport, turning a desperate escape into a scene of horror and heartbreak. The blast also claimed the lives of at least 170 Afghan civilians, men, women, and children who had gathered in hopes of finding safety. Families were torn apart, and the grief that followed was felt across Afghanistan and the world. These Americans died while performing a humanitarian mission under extreme pressure, working tirelessly to evacuate as many people as possible. For the U.S. military, it was the deadliest day in Afghanistan in a decade, a stark reminder of the risks faced even in the final hours of the war. Dozens more were left with life-altering injuries, both physical and psychological. The scars of the day would follow them home, underscoring the brutal reality and lasting impact of the withdrawal. The material cost was staggering as well. An estimated $85 billion in U.S. military equipment, ranging from rifles and armored vehicles to helicopters and drones, was left behind, now in Taliban hands. This arsenal, which included advanced aircraft and sophisticated weaponry, quickly became a propaganda tool for the Taliban. It also raised serious concerns about regional security, as these weapons could now be used to strengthen the Taliban's grip or fall into the hands of other militant groups. The airlift itself was historic. Over 120,000 people were evacuated in just a matter of days. Yet, despite this massive effort, thousands of Afghan allies, interpreters, and their families were left behind. For many, the promise of safety was broken, leaving them exposed to retribution and an uncertain future. The loss of both people and equipment left a deep and lasting stain on American history. Memorials and moments of silence now mark the sacrifice, but the sense of loss lingers. Critics argue the withdrawal was a catastrophic failure, pointing to the chaos, the loss of life, and the strategic setbacks. Congressional hearings and public outcry continue, as the consequences of those final days are still being debated and felt today. The images of Taliban fighters parading with American weapons and equipment became a symbol of lost control and a powerful reminder of the war's unresolved legacy. For Afghan civilians, the suffering did not end with the withdrawal. Many were forced to flee their homes, ending up in refugee camps or living in fear under Taliban rule. Families mourned lost loved ones, and the hopes for a better future were shattered for countless people. The aftermath of the withdrawal continues to shape the region's security landscape. Taliban checkpoints, increased border tensions, and the threat of renewed violence have become part of daily life in Afghanistan. 3 years on, the human and strategic costs of the withdrawal are still being reckoned with, by veterans, by families, and by a world still grappling with the consequences of America's longest war. After the withdrawal, President Biden and Vice President Harris faced intense scrutiny for their roles in the chaotic exit. The world watched as the administration struggled to explain the rapid collapse of the Afghan government and the harrowing scenes at Kabul airport. Questions mounted about the decision-making process, the intelligence assessments, and the speed at which events unfolded. Harris's claim of being the last person in the room during key decisions became a focal point for critics, linking her directly to the outcome. Her visible presence in high-level meetings was intended to signal leadership, but it also made her a target for those seeking accountability. Critics accused her of endorsing flawed plans and failing to acknowledge the mission's shortcomings. Some argued that her silence in the aftermath spoke volumes, while others pointed to her previous statements as evidence of complicity. President Biden, fulfilling his promise to end forever wars, was criticized for underestimating the Taliban's advance and the Afghan army's collapse. Many questioned whether the administration had ignored warnings from military and intelligence officials, and if the withdrawal plan was rushed without adequate contingency measures. His public addresses were seen as defensive and lacking empathy. Instead of reassuring the nation, his tone was perceived as dismissive, fueling further frustration among both allies and critics. Both leaders were portrayed by opponents as architects of a catastrophe, marked by poor judgment and a failure to heed warnings. Editorials and political cartoons depicted them as out of touch, while demonstrators demanded accountability for the lives lost and the chaos that ensued. The image of Biden checking his watch during a ceremony for the fallen became a symbol for critics of detachment. For many, it encapsulated a perceived lack of empathy and respect for the sacrifices made by American service members and their families. For many, the withdrawal was not just a policy failure, but a profound failure of leadership. The images of desperate Afghans, abandoned allies, and a hasty military exit left a lasting impression, raising difficult questions about accountability and the true cost of ending America's longest war. Criticism of Biden and Harris extended beyond Afghanistan, questioning their backgrounds and qualifications. Harris's lack of foreign policy experience and her early exit from the 2020 primary were used to paint her as unprepared for national security decisions. Biden's long Washington career was framed as a history of poor judgment, culminating in the chaotic withdrawal. Opponents argued their leadership failures were predictable, resulting in lost lives, abandoned allies, and diminished U.S. prestige. The Afghanistan crisis became the centerpiece of a narrative portraying both as unfit for the weight of command. The chaotic withdrawal damaged America's global reputation, shaking allies' confidence and emboldening adversaries. NATO partners felt sidelined by the lack of consultation, questioning U.S. reliability. China and Russia seized on the moment, portraying the U.S. as a declining power. For countries relying on U.S. security guarantees, the events in Kabul raised doubts about American commitments. The Taliban's return created new terrorist threats, with intelligence agencies warning of renewed risks from groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K. The loss of on-the-ground intelligence made counter-terrorism more difficult. The withdrawal sparked debate over America's future role in the world, between isolationism and continued global leadership. Some argue for retreat, others for renewed engagement. The withdrawal forced a painful reassessment of U.S. power and purpose. 3 years later, its impact on alliances and security is still unfolding. In response to the withdrawal, critics vowed to restore America's strength and global respect. They promised a return to peace through strength, arguing only new leadership could repair the damage. The message, a powerful, assertive America, would deter adversaries and reassure allies. Calls to rebuild the military and secure borders were framed as essential to national safety. The memory of the 13 fallen service members was invoked as a call to honor their sacrifice with renewed resolve. This emotional appeal aimed to galvanize support for a more confident, assertive U.S. posture. Critics warned that the perceived incompetence of the withdrawal foreshadowed even greater dangers. Dire predictions included the threat of World War III and economic collapse if current leadership remained. The argument, American weakness invites aggression from adversaries like Russia and China. The Afghanistan exit was cited as evidence of a leadership crisis with global consequences. These warnings framed the political debate as a choice between strength and disaster. The memory of Kabul served as a stark warning of what's at stake in future leadership decisions. 3 years later, our greatest responsibility is to remember the lives lost, lives that were dedicated to service, courage, and the hope for a better future. Their sacrifice echoes through the families and communities they left behind, and through the nation that honors them. Especially the 13 U.S. service members who died in Kabul, whose bravery in the face of chaos saved countless lives during the evacuation. Their names and stories remind us of the true cost of conflict. Honoring their sacrifice means recognizing the profound human cost of war, beyond politics. It means standing with the families who grieve, and acknowledging the pain that lingers long after the headlines fade. We must also remember the Afghan civilians killed, wounded, or left behind, whose lives were forever changed by the violence and upheaval. Their stories are often unheard, but their suffering is real. And support those still at risk, Afghan allies, interpreters, and families who continue to seek safety and a new beginning. Our commitment to them must not end with the withdrawal. This anniversary demands honest reflection on the strategic failures that led to the chaotic exit. The images of desperation at the airport are a stark reminder of the consequences of miscalculation and miscommunication. Only by confronting uncomfortable truths about our decisions, our planning, and our responsibilities can we prevent repeating such mistakes in the future. The lesson is one of humility, reminding us that even the most powerful nations must act with care, foresight, and respect for those affected by our choices. Ending a war is as complex as starting one, requiring realism, responsibility, and a willingness to adapt when circumstances change. America must apply these lessons to future foreign policy, ensuring that our actions abroad reflect our values and our commitment to human dignity. Engaging the world with wisdom, not hubris, means listening, learning, and building partnerships rooted in trust and mutual respect. By honoring the fallen and learning from failure, we pay tribute not only to those we lost, but to the ideals they served. We can strive for a future where such tragedy is never repeated, where compassion and wisdom guide our choices. The legacy of Kabul is a call to remember, to reflect, and to act with greater care and understanding, to learn, to do better, and to honor the memory of all those touched by this chapter in history.